Hi, good morning, everyone. Time for our second installment of social emotional learning, what we're calling kind of mindfulness in the brain, trying to help you guys settle into some understanding about the neuroscience behind our social emotional learning curriculum and how we can implement it in the classroom. Also, how we can just better understand our students, ourselves, and where we might be coming from on a day-to-day basis. So today I want to go a little deeper into the impact of stress on the brain and why it's important to understand how this impacts kids' ability to learn, their ability to be sort of present in the classroom or focused. So we have what we call now, it used to be called, at-risk kids. It used to be called asset or deficit-based development. The language is changing now because some of those words and descriptions are problematic. 15 years ago, when I was in grad school at a great institution, we were still talking about kids in terms of who's at risk or not. The problem with that is it generalized whole groups of people. So generalized that all Black kids were at risk, that all Hispanic kids were at risk, all kids of single parents were at risk, instead of looking at the specific adverse experiences of a specific child. So now we're getting more into some understanding that risk is not ubiquitous. Risk is not generalized. It is really about a particular set of adverse childhood experiences. And what Michelle and I have been wanting to focus on is resilience. How do we create resilience in the face of adverse childhood experiences, what is shortened to be called ACEs? So some ACEs that we can think of that I know we encounter every day with the kids that we work with, living in chronic poverty, living in a single parent household where the parent might work several jobs and the student may be in charge of younger siblings or in charge of running the household. Abuse may be a real adverse childhood experience in many of our kids' lives. Violence, moving around a lot, moving from place to place. And we can't underestimate the impact of microaggression, of racism, chronic, systemic, felt and not felt, perceived and real, on the body. We have learned that people of color are at a higher risk of heart disease and chronic stress and diseases related to this, therefore shortening lives by a couple of years compared to their white counterparts. So racism is an adverse childhood experience and an adverse adult experience, but there's no acronym for that. So when we are faced chronically with stressors on a daily basis, our body doesn't have a chance to settle down. Our amygdala, so this little kind of walnut-shaped thing in the middle of our brain, is the center of the brain that detects fear and prepares our body for reaction to that fear. It prepares our body for the emergency and then throws us into fight, flight, or freeze behaviors. So when our amygdala sounds like an alarm bell, it releases stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, etc. And when those stress hormones are released, they can take up to 3 days to discharge from our body. So you can imagine that when a kiddo or an adult is faced with chronic everyday stressors, those stress hormones never leave the body. So we're just like bathing in cortisol, a chronic stress hormone. When that is the case, when we are in chronic stress, one of the goals that we would like to be able to achieve is to teach kids and adults how to relieve the body in the face of chronic stress. It is possible. It may not be possible to change what the stressors are, what the environment is presenting, but it is possible to help cope in the face of stress. This is also true when we have an acute stress. We've been in a car accident or something aggressive has happened towards us, but it may not happen every day. These same truths apply. The stress hormone takes 3 days to leave the body. So our practices are around helping those stress hormones to discharge and to be sort of interventionists, our own interventionists in this practice. The first thing that can help is drinking water. So water provides homeostasis or balance in the body. And in a stressful situation, if we can attend to our bodies by drinking twice as much water as we might normally, then we can actually calm the body down. We can also practice breathing, right? This is something we talked about last week. The 4-7-8 breathing is a direct and intentional pause that sends a calming message to the brain, to the amygdala, and therefore to the rest of the body to kind of settle. I want us to think about chronic stress a little bit like a snow globe. So I have this little guy. It's an owl inside of a snow globe. This is the resting body, right? This is the body at rest. The snow globe is calm. The owl is still. But what happens when I have chronic stress, right? Life feels a bit like the snowstorm. The chronic stress is dizzying. The chronic stress is always moving and is sending our body into overdrive. So I want to think about what is it that the owl, who despite the chronic stress, can teach us, okay? The owl in the snow globe finds stillness, right? That is true for us too. How do we find stillness amidst the storm? One way, as I said, is through breath. Another way is through comfort. What activities, rituals, behaviors comfort you? I know Michelle talks a lot about like holding a warm cup, right? The warmth of the cup sort of dissipating throughout the body. That warmth, that ability to just sit with a warm cup is a real soothing activity. For some of us, it's writing, journaling, discharging things in that way. Creative expression, of course, is a way to dissipate the stress in the body, to discharge it. And it's actually, you guys may know this as writers, as practitioners, but the actual like pencil to paper does something for our brains that, let's say, typing it does not, because the motor skills involved in writing is a communication between our hand and our brain, and it's as if literally the stress or the feeling or the incident is leaving through our hands. So a helpful way to write about stress when it happens is to ask very concrete questions. What happened? Where were you? What were you wearing? Who was there? What time was it? These concrete questions help us get back into our body. And we can actually, as practitioners, as teaching fellows, do writing exercises like that keep kids in the concrete, in the here and now. So in a moment of stress, once the fear has passed, if there is a real stressor in front of you that needs a real response, it is absolutely our body's protective mechanism to send us into that response. But once the need for the response has ended, how do we get back into our body? This is where the concrete comes into play. So as a practice, if something stressful has just happened in your classroom, if something stressful has happened to the students to begin their day, if something stressful has happened to one student to begin their day, to get into the concrete details is really helpful. So what you might do is say, okay, I'm here now. My feet are on the ground. I'm in this classroom. It's 9 in the morning. I can feel my butt in the chair. I can feel the clothes on my body. These are concrete sensations that a kid or a grown-up can get in touch with in order to recognize that the stress can sort of leave our body as we name those concrete details. Continuing down that path, again, back to the where was I when the stressful event occurred? What happened? 3 facts about what happened. What time of day was it? Who else was there? What was my response? How do I feel now? So these sort of what was happening then? Let me check in and what's happening now. Again, concrete experiences that help us to reset and settle into our bodies. I'm just going to invite you guys to think through that for yourselves the next time you have a stressful event. Some of us suffer from chronic anxiety, and this is actually a cognitive behavioral approach to chronic anxiety, is just naming where we are in time and space can be really, really helpful. So let's think about the takeaway message, I guess, is, again, the snow globe, right? What happens in a resting position and what happens when stress is all around us, the dizzying impact of stress. And how do we settle that storm in our bodies? How do we settle our minds so that we can focus on the task or the day in front of us? I hope you guys have a great week. I hope these are helpful. I would love to hear how this is settling with you and whether you have any questions. I'm going to close by reading something from Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Buddhist practitioner who's about to die, actually, but has had a tremendous impact on sort of bringing Buddhism and those practices to the West. Every time your fear is invited up, every time you recognize it and smile at it, your fear will lose some of its strength. Have a great day.